Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this MOLA Education Committee presentation of In Harmony, Exploring Academic Performance Libraries. My name is Elaine Lee, and I am co-chair of the MOLA Education Committee alongside Alizabeth Nowland from the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance, whom you'll meet in a moment. The University of Michigan is hosting this year's annual MOLA conference, and in fact, it's the first time an academic institution is hosting the conference. So, to help get everyone excited for this landmark occasion, we're here today to share a bit of insight into the many things that academic performance libraries and librarians do to support our ensembles, musicians, and institutions. Please note that this presentation is being recorded and will be posted online at a later date. We'll start with some introductions, get into our topics of library tasks we undertake, move into details about working with ensembles, library staffing, some of the things we're addressing on the side, and then there will be room for questions at the end. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Elaine Lee, and I am an assistant librarian for the Juilliard School, where I also serve as principal librarian for the Juilliard Preparatory Division. I regularly freelance around New York, and in the summers, you can find me doing library work for NYO2 and the Chelsea Music Festival. I previously served as a librarian for a few other places, including the Curtis Institute of Music, Oberlin Conservatory, University of Illinois Bands Department, the Tango Music Center, Interlochen Arts Camp, and the Aspen Music Festival. I'm joined today by my esteemed colleagues, Elizabeth and KT, who I will turn this over to now to introduce themselves. Thanks,
Hi,
friends.
yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Nowland. I'm the head performance librarian and licensing manager for the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance, host of the 2025 MOLA Conference. I've been at the University of Michigan for 9 years now, and in my role, I oversee music preparation and library services for well over 50 ensembles at the School of Music, Theater, and Dance, and I facilitate all music-related copyright licensing for the entire University of Michigan campus. In this position, I secure all sync licenses, master rights, mechanical rights, and performance rights for more than 1,000 live performances produced by students and faculty. And prior to my position at the University of Michigan, I was the performance librarian for the Indiana University Jacobs School of Music, overseeing the Performing Ensembles Division. Past engagements include principal librarian of the Joffrey Ballet, library apprenticeship at the Santa Fe Opera, and freelance library work with the Atlanta Opera and Utah Opera. I'm active in the greater musical world, specifically as an expert in copyright, regularly presenting at conferences and campuses across the country, and I'm currently the copyright specialist in residence for copyrightlaws.com, which is an educational resource offering online copyright information and instructional courses for understanding copyright law in the US and Canada.
You guys have incredible credentials. This is amazing. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. My name is KT Somero, and you might be wondering what I'm doing here because I'm currently one of three full-time performance librarians for the Los Angeles Philharmonic. But I was actually proud to begin my career in this field with academic institutions. So I started out with Northwestern University Bienen School of Music, and then I went on to the Colburn School Conservatory of Music. I went to LA Opera from there and served as head librarian for a few years. And then I was delighted to be invited to join the LA Phil. So like many performance librarians, I'm an instrumentalist by training. I studied clarinet performance at both UCLA and DePaul. And I found myself performing as a member of a contemporary ensemble in Chicago that performed primarily, well, actually only the works of living composers. And so I was in a position where I was constantly working with brand new works, hot off the presses, workshopping those pieces with those composers and trying to get them to the stage in a comfortable manner. So that got me interested in music preparation and the behind the scenes side of what we do to get things on stage. And I always loved working in academia. And I think if the call of the bigger show and the bigger stage hadn't been so strong, I still would be there happily working for a college or conservatory. It's an amazing role, and I'm delighted to be invited to present about it today with you guys.
We're so happy to have you here, KT. Thanks. So for the purposes of this webinar, we have decided to focus on performance libraries which serve degree guaranteeing institutions and institutes of higher learning, though there are, of course, performance libraries affiliated with educational initiatives, which might include summer festivals or even education departments within non-academic performance organizations. We also aim to keep our scope as international as possible and would love to hear more from any of our non-North American colleagues who might be tuning in. If you've gone through an educational program, you may recall some of your own experiences as a student, trying to figure out next steps while navigating the obstacles of a particular environment, the demands of balancing a schedule and homework or practicing, or learning how to manage your own time and pressure among people and peers. Every institution offers students different experiences towards their growth, and academic performance librarians are essential players in preparing students for the expectations they'll encounter outside of school. And because every institution offers something different, whether it's different curricular structures or enrollment or any 100 other elements, performance librarians find themselves serving a very wide range of initiatives and environments, and everyone's processes will be different. We also find ourselves serving a wide range of experiences. Some students enter with a career already well underway, while others may have never played in an orchestra before. It's pretty safe to say that no two academic performance librarians are navigating the same exact institutional ecosystem. This also means that performance librarians might be classified under some perhaps unexpected departments and units and might be able to be part of unions sometimes due to these classifications, and some might not even be called performance librarians at all, as you can see on this screen. It can also unfortunately cause occasionally some institutional confusion, which will require some effort to sort out. And some of us do have a little bit of experience with that. It's not necessarily the most pleasant thing to do, but it's necessary and important that we make that people are clear about what our tasks are and in what happens in these titles. Sometimes these title designations are determined by institutional funding, which may need specific terminology to ensure proper payment for the position. Other times, the titles are attempts to encapsulate a broad job description. Many performance study programs are structured to replicate or resemble non-academic performance organizations with artistic administrators, managers for operations and personnel and stage. And similar to those ensembles, librarians might hold more than one role and be responsible for overseeing music preparation alongside personnel assignments and other ensemble operations.
The moral of the story might be that if you're looking for such position and you're looking at job postings on university or college conservatory sites, you may be surprised to find that something with a title that doesn't include librarian is actually a library job. So, thinking outside the box and reading those job descriptions might point you towards a position that really is library heavy that you'll love.
Here you can see some of the tasks that we do in our libraries for music preparation, as well as internal library responsibilities. Once again, depending on the specific needs of the institution, there are many ways in which each of these tasks might occur. For instance, some places might require performers to carry around all their music with them throughout the duration of a concert cycle, and this might be because multiple rehearsals are happening at once during a class time block, and there's a very small staff that can't be in multiple places at once. Other places might allow performers to leave their music with the library, which means librarians or other staff are responsible for setting out and picking up music at the end of each rehearsal or performance. Some places might allow players to check out their music without supervision, and others might only allow distribution under the watchful eyes of library staff. Regardless of the specifics, most library responsibilities involve some degree of situation assessment plus puzzle solving. And now I'm going to hand this over to Liz to discuss where a lot of these puzzles occur in ensembles.
Yeah. So the next list, yep, there we go. Awesome. So this is a comprehensive list of the most common types of ensembles that we could possibly support in our roles as academic performance librarians. Obviously, the number of enrolled participants will directly influence the possibility of some of these ensembles. The type of ensemble will likely impact how many performances are scheduled. Instrumental versus opera, for example, and programming is also greatly impacted by the size capacity of an ensemble. I also want to point out that some of these groups fall under the seminar and lab category. Typically, when there is an ensemble of students for an orchestra or band seminar, for example, they will not have full instrumentation due to the maximum number of students able to enroll in a lab or seminar course. These groups tend to be chamber-sized ensembles. Lastly, it's important to note that, as we all know too well, there are only 5 weekdays in the week. Usually, an academic institution will have set rehearsal times for each type of ensemble, which may fluctuate due to course prerequisites, facilities, and scheduling. Go ahead and do that next slide. So, not to panic, but at the University of Michigan, I oversee performance library services, which provide music preparation, acquisition, and copyright licensing for over 60 ensembles. I think there are actually almost 75 on here. This includes ensembles, courses, sponsored student organizations, and affiliated organizations. This slide demonstrates the sheer breadth of support that academic performance librarians are liable to provide. Often our colleagues outside of our immediate institution have no idea the capacity of support that we provide. So I would definitely recommend that each of you listening make a point to document every ensemble that you support and in exactly what category you support them. Go ahead and do the next slide. Thank you. So the next two slides show some examples of rehearsal cycles from our various present and past institutions. At the University of Michigan, we typically have only one performance per cycle for our instrumental ensembles and choirs, compared to more than one performance per cycle for our opera, musical theater, theater, and dance productions. And for our instrumental ensembles, our orchestras tend to have fewer rehearsals than our bands. Our rehearsals usually last between an hour and 20 minutes for our largest choir, for example, and an hour and 50 minutes for our large instrumental ensembles. So
I
this
think I
gives
did one of those bottom slides. There was a different model at one of the institutions I worked at that modeled more professional orchestra rehearsal cycle because of incoming guest conductors and because the faculty wanted them to have that kind of experience. So I just wanted to mention that one little note that I added on the bottom there. We had more of a setting where it was 2.5 or 3 hour rehearsals with a standard break that would emulate a union setting for rehearsals rules. And those would take place within, like a 5-day period. And so it would be, rehearsals every single day leading up to one performance and a really truncated setting rather than a course setting over a number of weeks, as you mentioned.
That's awesome. And that's really good to point out. The asterisk under symphony band, for example, it would also include sectional times within that 8 to 10 range, whether it's a full ensemble rehearsal or sectionals that are split off, it still counts in that kind of range for us. So we take rehearsals, full ensemble rehearsals and sectionals very close together. So yeah.
It's also worth noting that we appreciate those who handle our scheduling very, very much. It is a whole puzzle
Yes.
upon another puzzle, and that can often dictate when rehearsals are about to happen. And so
Yeah.
sometimes we enter into cycles not yet knowing. We might be partway through a semester already, and a new special event has been announced, and our scheduler has to find some time to get everyone into rooms, the right size rooms, get the rooms set up, and then we at the same time we're preparing the music, and it's really a team effort all around.
Yeah.
Scheduling at institutions such as those is such a matrix. It's absolutely incredible. So I'd like to take an opportunity to talk about staffing in an academic setting. Uh, as my colleagues have mentioned here, we often had to schedule around class meeting times. And at a large institution, you simply can't physically be there for everything, or you really have to live on campus, which I don't think any of us would like to do. So therefore, the library really had to work, or orchestra office or ensembles office, whatever your tasks included, really had to work as an information hub, very similar to a professional orchestra setting where the library is also working as an information hub, but to the max because of the number of rooms, classes, constituencies, students, faculty, staff, support staff, everything that are involved and need that information. And so I think academic performance librarians really become absolute pros at organizing and distributing all that information in a way that is provided in a timely manner and also provided in a consistent manner. And so all of those different groups know where to come to find that information. So I think you really excel at that realm in this position. Library open office hours can vary depending on the type of program, because some courses might be meeting in the evening, some courses might be meeting in all different buildings all over campus. And that really affects the level of service that the performance library can provide. And so that affects how you're staffing rehearsals, how you're staffing sectionals, how you're staffing performances. Oftentimes with such a diverse program, you would find that you're relying on student staff if you have the opportunity to have them. In my case at Northwestern University, I was relying on graduate assistants, and those were orchestral conducting students, master's and doctoral students, who were assigned as part of their graduate assistant time and paid to actually be ensemble managers. That was a great way to get them involved and to also teach them how much has to go into managing an ensemble and providing music for everybody. Some college and university settings, you'll be involved with production staff, which are professional staff members that work for the institution, and also administrative teams. And so you can see the way that you organize and communicate with all those different groups can really vary based on the structure at your institution. As Elaine mentioned, the availability of music and folders for rehearsals can really vary based on staffing and library availability and open hours. So many times you're dealing with a checkout system versus where staff or librarians provide and collect the folders. And that just has to be structured that it meets the needs and the availability of the librarians. But as we mentioned before, utilizing student workers or work study students, if available, can be really helpful. That opens up a big question though, because they are different levels in their musical training, and they're at different points in their academic career. And so what type of training do they already have? What type of experience do they have with score reading? And then you're getting into, do they copy and scan only for you? Are they doing part prep and distribution? Are they copying or even creating bowings if you have graduate string players that are able to make that quintet for you? Are they dealing with cataloging? And then you're constantly in a training situation with them because they're new and the academic program changes over every year, every few years. So it's a revolving door of training students and then having them become invaluable parts of your team, and then them graduating and moving on and taking their wonderful skills to their next institution. But you're constantly working with students that have their own class schedules, homework, auditions, travel, everything. And Elaine, I believe there is a session coming up at our annual MOLA conference in Ann Arbor. I think it's student workers setting the tempo. Is that right?
That is accurate.
Sounds like a great opportunity to delve into this further. So if nobody has any questions, I think we should move on to the composer side.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie.
Great. And we will have questions at the end.
So our libraries interact with the full spectrum of composers, from guest composers and or their commissions on concert cycles, composition faculty, and of course, composition students. We're always learning new things as performance librarians, and that includes my learning only about 10 hours ago that some academic music programs don't even have composition components. However, for those that do, what happens in the program and what it needs from us can differ wildly based on the number of composition students enrolled and how the program has been structured. If there are student composer readings, workshops, and performances of their works on orchestra composition concerts or within other concert cycles, the library might be asked to prepare the music just as they would for any other work on a concert. The process can vary a little to allow for educational guidance from the library, such as reviewing or proofreading their materials to make sure everything is in good condition for the players. Sometimes librarians are even creating the bowings for these performances because the preparation timeline might be denser to allow for adjustments to their works. And we as librarians can utilize our knowledge of what bowings would work best for what writing to help get the music out to the players faster. In certain cases, librarians can work with composition programs to even have the students create their own parts for these uses in the library, but that generally works best with smaller groups of composers. Other libraries are able to provide printing and binding services, and we are sometimes asked by faculty to speak with them in their seminars and classes about creating ideal materials. These are also opportunities to help impart on them some information which may be useful in their careers, such as meeting deadlines, communicating effectively with other librarians, publishers, how to license their works, and also, did I say meeting deadlines already? That's
Which we
pretty
have to giggle about because we all know how that can be. And how many different ways can you creatively say, have you thought about page turns? Have you thought about
Yes.
page turns?
Have you thought about a
page turns?
cover page? Cover pages. I need a mug that says that. Working
This
with
may be
composition. Working with composition students is certainly a team effort between our libraries and the composition faculty.
This may be affected now by the advent of technology as well. We were working primarily with printed material, which had to do a lot more with formatting and the aforementioned page turns. Maybe now more students have iPads and that technology available in their pedals. And so maybe we're transitioning more towards them being a little bit more self-serving, but then they still need the training to go on and work with professional ensembles later in their career that are still printing, right? Or work with larger ensembles that need printed material.
Yeah, absolutely. And at both my previous employer, Indiana, and here at Michigan, both schools have very large composition departments. And both both schools would do an annual kind of new music concert where one of our orchestras is paired with the composition students, typically graduating composition students who will write a piece for the orchestra. And it has to follow very specific guidelines. They have to make sure that the string parts are bowed. They are responsible for that. That was kind of something that we impressed the importance upon them so that they could understand how to generate good bowings as composers. And so the rehearsal cycle with the orchestra is their chance to make edits and changes. We would print an 8.5 by 11 kind of booklet set of parts. They will make edits during the rehearsal process. And then they would meet with their student conductors. Each piece was conducted by one of the student conductors. And so at the end of that process, post-performance, we would offer them a complete reprint of their piece on, nice paper, full set, beautiful score, all of that. And it's always a great process. Sure, there are some growing pains with that because, as we're all very familiar with, um, it's a communication process. They're learning their students. And so it's a fantastic opportunity for us as performance librarians to help educate them from our perspective. And I always really enjoy that part of the year. And also at the University of Michigan, we do provide printing and binding services to our composition and conducting departments. This helps the students feel empowered to compose more. They get their physical sets printed, and that's really nice that we can do that in-house rather than, them having to pay to go to Kinko's or something to get stuff printed. And as Elaine said, we often are able to present to the composition studios and classes, meet with them, meet one-on-one with them. I do consults with them, whether it's for copyright reasons or just general performance library needs. That's always really excellent, and we really enjoy that process. So yeah.
It's really helpful to have discussions early on with composition students and faculty, especially regarding the finances of printing. Who's paying for that? And if they're having a commission or something, they should clearly define in their commissioning agreement who's paying for that paper and who's in charge of actually handling that printing. So it's a good opportunity to make them hip to that at this point in
Oh
their
yeah.
career.
Yeah, absolutely.
Conductors. So many different academic programs are dealing with conductors in different ways and different types of conductors. And so some academic programs where orchestra or wind ensemble or whatever is a class, the conductor might be a faculty member, adjunct faculty. They may be supported by graduate students who are studying conducting. And then also there are other programs where, for example, at Colburn School, when I worked there, because they were working with a professional model, it was really important for them to bring in prominent guest conductors. And so we had the opportunity to work with people like Sir Neville Mariner, Esa-Pekka Salonen, my current boss, Gustavo Dudamel, also, James Conlin, these type of people. And so having students interface with visiting conductors when they're really only there for a week can be a very different experience than having them interface with a faculty member who's there with them throughout the year or throughout their whole academic term. So it can be a different experience if they have questions about the bowings or questions about additions. It can also affect the availability of repertoire and physical parts to the students because, for example, maybe a guest conductor is bringing their own personal set and it's not available until later. So there's lots of considerations about what material is being provided, who it's coming from, if it's owned by the institution, if it's being prepared just for that one guest conductor. And then, maybe the next time it'll be with a different faculty member. And so you may be facing situations where you have multiple sets of parts for a work, or you have to create, a different set of string parts, depending on if that material is being used across different ensembles. And you may also have different sets of parts that have to do with different structures for, non-majors versus majors versus summer programs versus, younger student programs at your institution. So really the conductor question and the type of person that you're working with is tied closely to materials and it gets complex. So yeah, I talked about class setting. Also with the lab and repertoire classes, you may be working with student conductors that are coming in. And you may be working, as Liz mentioned, with an ensemble that is of a smaller size, like a chamber size. And, for example, at Northwestern, when I was working there, we had piano students that had the wonderful training to be able to come in and score read live in class. And so it was interesting for the student conductors to work in that setting. But then also we had to kind of couch and have them not get unrealistic expectations about what it would be like on the outside, right? So we would work very closely with them in their student conducting recitals. And, that had to do with, choosing their programs, choosing additions, making sure that they could come in and prepare the materials. And then it was a question of, were they in charge of bringing it to their services or, would there be library staffing for that as well? Were they permitted to use university materials or were they expected to create their own for that? And so it was a really good opportunity to get to know them and get to work with them on the practical side of things at a part in their career where they're really having to consider that as they're taking auditions and looking for work outside of the academic institution later on. I had a question for you both, actually, that kind of has to do with conductors. How did you deal with ensemble placement auditions? And were student conductors involved in that, or were you coordinating that with faculty and, full-time conductors?
In the institutions where I've worked, it's largely been faculty driven, and the library would just assist with providing excerpts and organizing those and sending those out to the players so they have them ready. But there wasn't a lot of communication in my experience with involving conductors into that.
Yeah, at here there's a lot of communication that happens with our conducting faculty and our instrumental faculty. So it's a multi-step process with placement audition preparation. We will send out an initial email to our conducting faculty and we will ask for major repertoire selections, specifically to share with the instrumental faculty for their excerpt consideration. And then once I receive that information back, we will then send that information to the instrumental faculty when we do a call for excerpts. And then we provide them with our historical repository of audition excerpts that have been used. We have a running spreadsheet of every excerpt that has ever been asked since documentation started. And then we have a PDF repository of all of our excerpts. And then we also ask if they're going to supply any new excerpts. So it's a multi-step process that involves a lot of deadlines and a lot of communication. So yeah.
Very complex and often felt like kind of an afterthought trying to trace all that information. I had a similar experience as try as we might. It's a busy academic term, right? And then one thing I think I didn't get a chance to touch on yet was rental music in dealing with conductors. Often I found that budgets at university settings were very tightly regulated. And so if students were in a position, especially for their conducting recitals, where they would like to choose all that exciting rental music, and then being faced with the news that maybe they didn't have the budget for that and having to either fundraise or having to choose different repertoire. That was an interesting learning experience for the student conductors because possibly they weren't familiar as much with the publishing world, and so their friendly ensemble librarian was a real friend to them in helping to coach them through that process. Anything else, or shall we move to copyright?
All right. So our roles as academic performance librarians often include being the go-to person when it comes to music licensing and copyright permission facilitation. Copyright and licensing may factor into our positions kind of all very differently. Because performance librarians often oversee music acquisition and procurement, which oftentimes includes the facilitation of rental rights, it seems quite natural that our roles have taken on more and more copyright duties as well. In my role at U of M, I'm responsible for all copyright licensing that involves music for the entire campus, not just the music school. This involves facilitating hundreds of live performing rights, synchronization licenses, mechanical rights, master rights, and live stream licenses. This obviously may differ from your experience and duties at your institution, but I work closely with our University of Michigan Office of General Counsel to facilitate our licenses utilizing best practices, best terms, and best judgment as our institution acts as the state of Michigan. My role directly is the liaison with the performing rights organizations that we have blanket licenses with, and I am responsible for drafting licenses to use on behalf of the University of Michigan for copyright holders who may not have existing licenses in place. Because of this, my role does require substantial knowledge of U.S. copyright law, particularly how it applies to music and entertainment. And as a go-to music copyright person at my institution, I am able to play an active and communicative role in the negotiation phase of the licensing process. If I ever have any questions or concerns, I'm able to consult with the OGC or our U of M copyright office, but I am largely supported and empowered to facilitate these agreements wholly alone. The types of ensembles at an academic institution directly affect what kinds of licensing might be required. So, an academic institution with a strong department of dance, opera, and/or musical theater will need to facilitate grand rights permissions for stage productions, whereas smaller schools of music with more limited instrumental departments might not have full instrumental ensembles like bands and orchestras. These schools would likely have fewer concert performances, facilitate fewer rental works, and oftentimes are working with a smaller budget. It's important to note that some academic institutions facilitate copyright licenses through a separate administrative office. Sometimes the school has a general counsel's office that may want to handle copyright licensing and negotiations directly. This differs from institution to institution. Sometimes this process will be a collaboration with other units on campus, like procurement or finance. But ultimately, your particular department may not be responsible for handling 100% of the copyright licensing required for your performances and productions. Many of us work at institutions that are not public state universities, so the role of performance librarian at a private institution or conservatory may differ considerably. Funding differences between private and public sectors directly affects our roles as performance librarians. We're often playing the role of consultant when it comes to edition selections of a piece. While performing the public domain version of a piece might save some money, would performing and studying the critical edition provide a more educational student experience? Conversely, we can sometimes play the role of a budget superhero. If there is a work with a public domain or inexpensive option that poses no educational detriment over an expensive rental or exorbitant purchase. With rental works, remember that everything is negotiable. Often, copyright holders and publishing entities will work with an institution's budget restrictions. If there is a rental cost or license that is too high, you have every right to negotiate for your budget and institution. An academic institution's presence online plays a huge role in communication and copyright. As performance librarians, we are usually the go-to folks when it comes to repertoire information used to publicize performances and departmental events. And as performance librarians, we're often the go-to folks to facilitate the necessary licenses to post these performances online, either live or after the fact. At U of M, our Concerts and Events office works closely with our Marketing and Communications office, as well as the Office of Admissions, to publicize the schedule of events and programs. Our office's role in this process has evolved to include a significant part of our performance librarian and concert programs manager's position, as Megan, who is on here, shout out to Megan Fisher, handles all large ensemble concert programs, special event programs, studio, faculty, and guest artist recital programs, which often includes most of our instrumental ticketed events. I would say that concert programs fall under that other duties as assigned category that we're very familiar with. And communication is absolutely key to facilitating this. It's critical that we provide the most updated repertoire and personnel information so that it can be shared with the public, either in print or online. And for me in particular, I need to be sure that my information is absolutely accurate to ensure we're compliant with any performances we post online. So to finish the slide, I could talk hours about copyright and communication. I want to touch on support and tools. So regardless of your current work situation, you can be assured that there is an entire network of support in the field of academic performance librarianship in MOLA. If you are part of an academic institution that is not a MOLA member institution, I encourage you to explore becoming a member. There is incredible and valuable resources and tools available for performance librarians through MOLA, and a growing constituent of us are academic performance librarians. While not everyone might have a university general counsel's office or copyright office at their disposal, there are many ways to find resources and connect with other library colleagues to bounce ideas off, ask questions to, or collaborate and learn from each other through MOLA, through the Music Library Association, the University Information Policy Officers Organization, and many, many more.
I can also attest to saying that as a solo performance librarian with student staff in my first position at Northwestern, I wouldn't be still standing today if it weren't for the resources that MOLA provided to me,
Yeah.
both from an educational level and from collaboration and being able to consult colleagues and having access to study about things that I did not have very much experience with yet. So please, please, please try to have that as a resource to your institution if it's available to you.
That's a really good segue into the next slide, which goes into, we're going to talk a bit about archives and research and our own networks that we have. Among the great benefits of being an academic performance librarian is access to circulation libraries and their resources and their materials contained within the institutional archives. Circulation libraries are, of course, invaluable sources of information, and they can provide quick access to scores still under copyright, from which we can derive answers to questions such as instrumentation or programming, or access to digital resources such as Daniel's Online or music databases, from which we can find even more information very quickly. Other times, we can work with our circulation libraries to purchase smaller ensemble works that they'll later keep in their collections for others to check out. And we can also work with them to keep commissioned materials in their collections after a performance. I'm definitely guilty of having given commissioned materials for smaller ensembles to a circulation library to help save storage space in the performance library. We can also communicate with them to set aside scores for works still under copyright that ensembles are performing so students can study them. It's a really rich space for interlibrary collaboration and helping support each other's missions and motivations. Together, our positions provide opportunities for nurturing and fostering curiosity, especially with students whose future careers will depend heavily on good research, like conducting and composition students. Sometimes artistic departments will program historical recreations of significant concerts, such as the premiere of a famous work by a famous alum. And so we might be asked to find music which is out of print or reinsert something into the original performance that was removed from subsequent ones. And in those cases, our institutional archives, or maybe other institutional archives, can really be our friends. Occasionally, we also have opportunities to contribute to global research when scholars and historians writing books on orchestras or institutions or famous alumni contact us for information. Sometimes outside parties might simply contact us looking for information on their own memories of a concert they attended or perhaps played once if they're an alum. Academic performance librarians serve a lot of people beyond our enrollment and our literal institutional knowledge. As such, there are times when opportunities arise for us to identify spaces for filling in artistic gaps and promoting equity. By keeping in community with other performance librarians and connected within associations such as MOLA, we're able to keep sharing ideas and information to serve our musicians at the highest possible levels.
As a performance library that currently supports chamber music performances, I cannot even begin to tell you how much I miss the joys of interlibrary loan, especially when you have brass colleagues that are looking for works that are out of print. I miss it so much. It's an amazing tool. Please enjoy.
And then you call us sometimes and we can tell you where to look. We're in a very interesting position where we might be the first performance librarians a musician ever meets or works with, and through everyday interactions, we can do our best to inform them how to work with other performance librarians they'll encounter and how to be good colleagues to them. Some students and musicians may need more direct instruction, whether it's reminders to close their folders or return their music or to not scribble all over the music. And some might not ever care. But because we care about their experience, we still try. When we're lucky, we get to watch them grow over their years at our institutions and beyond. And it's especially amazing to encounter them again someday when they've progressed in their careers, sometimes even as new colleague librarians, sometimes even as new colleague academic performance librarians. It's sometimes like we're able to see or sense the future before they even are.
One of my favorite things is when a former library work study student wins an audition and becomes a part of your ensemble. That's incredible. Or also if you see them as a sub, it's just like seeing an old friend and they know to close their folder.
And they also maybe know too much about us. It's a danger. I think this is a good time to move on to the Q&A.
Yeah, so I think we probably have just a moment for some Q&A. Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask? There is a feature available where you can type questions and they can be directed to any one of us. So please don't be shy. I think while we wait just a moment for any questions to come in, I had a question to kick things off, actually. So Colburn began touring just as I was transitioning out and towards LA Opera. Do your organizations deal with touring, and is a librarian involved either physically or in the prep for that?
This is oddly triggering for me right now. We have 5 tours this month, including our University Symphony Orchestra, which is embarking to the South Africa tomorrow. And so actually Megan just packed 2 checked bag size luggage with all of our spare parts and things. And so we don't usually, well, this is the most tours that I've experienced all at once in my time here so far. We did a symphony band tour of the state of Michigan. We did not send a librarian, but we do have both of our actually library GSIs. We have graduate student instructors. Both of them were in attendance and acted kind of as our proxies. And then for the South Africa tour, we will not have a library representative. There are actually only, I think, 2 staff from the School of Music that will be going on tour with them outside of the conducting faculty and the student faculty 03. So there will not be a librarian on that tour, but we were invited to the Carnegie Hall portion of the tour, but could not attend because we're hosting a conference.
I've had a little bit of touring experiences with both small or large ensembles, depending on what the tour management feels like they might need. It's always a good idea to just imagine as many possible emergency scenarios as you can. It's good to make backups of backups. Just kind of project out, look out for if you're traveling internationally, what copyrights you might need in order to perform in those countries. But more or less, it's just more contingency planning as usual. And then with students, of course, there are complications involving, or there are things to think about with like travel visas, student visas, with traveling with minors. And so those are kind of just like extra things that will have to be factored into the process, not necessarily for library as much, but you're usually there with a limited staff, and then you might be asked to perform certain other tasks, such as handing out hotel keys or making room checks and being bus captains. It looks like we have a
It
couple of
really
questions
changed.
that come in.
We do, yeah. It looks like we have a couple of great questions that came in. One of the first ones is, how do your libraries handle lost and or damaged parts? Liz or Elaine?
So when I was at Indiana University, because the Performing Ensembles Division collection was part of the music library, it was cataloged by um, actual library catalogers on staff. It was all beautifully barcoded, and we had the ability when we checked our orchestra or choral materials out, we could actually check out those materials to the student's account. And so if any materials were lost or damaged, we actually could charge the student's Bursar account, which was awesome. When I got to Michigan, I quickly found out that no aspect of our collection was tied to the upstairs music library. And so it was a cataloging system that was entirely ours. And so we had to quickly determine how we were going to track down lost, damaged materials, how to handle, how to charge the students, if that was even worth it with so many students and so many circulating materials. It's still very much, a work in progress, and I think it will just continue to be because we have so many ensembles. Um, we are very sensitive and careful with charging students. We actually, instead of charging students for lost or missing materials, we will put a hold on their course that they're registered for in that ensemble, and they will not get a grade for that course unless they settle their situation with us. And then honestly, we do have a built-in budget for lost or missing materials that we have to dip into since we decided not to pursue charging students. And then in terms of the rest of that, we just basically pay any fees if it's an original. So
I always say you never know what kind of day or what kind of morning that person had leading up to them showing up with their part missing or damaged. So we always try to be kind, and to also keep in mind the budget constraints, but to also serve the program and the collection well. I think it really depends also on the way that your library is staffed and if music is checked out to students or if music is set out and collected by library staff, who's in care of that music at that time. Ultimately, the player would always be expected to be responsible for it. But, it's life and things do happen. And sometimes students have challenging days, just like the rest of us. So, how about you, Elaine?
Kind of similar. It all depends on the institution and what we're feeling like the message we're trying to impart upon students when they come to us saying they've lost or damaged a part. When they say that they've damaged a part, I actually really appreciate the honesty. But a lot of times it's a conversation that I have with deans or people who are more tied into their student life experience. And just to make sure that, as everyone has said, we're making that we're addressing the situation in a way that is kind and generous, but also still helps them learn the responsibility or lets them know of the gravity of what has been done and how that actually affects all of us, not just, the library, but what does it actually mean for the collection? What does it mean for how we will treat people in the future who lose their parts? It's not just a small thing, actually, it is kind of serious.
And with it being an academic setting, it might be the very first time that a lot of these people have worked with materials that they are supplied on loan to them that are valuable and need to be returned to the institution. Many people maybe were playing in youth orchestras where photocopies were provided and not tracked afterwards. And so, we greatly benefit from the educational opportunity to teach students how to interact with those materials. I think we have a couple other really good ones. Liz, did you want to read the one from Claire?
Yeah, is that in that's in
I
the
think it's in the chat. Yeah.
me-
Oh my gosh, they're really coming in. We gotta move.
I know.
Okay.
Okay, so do you have any recommendations about negotiating salaries or navigating job postings, especially when it is a library plus manager or other combined role with a wide range of responsibilities?
Both of mine, I will say, were library slash administrator slash personnel slash production roles. And so I think it would be really good to make sure that you have a clear picture of what those roles and responsibilities are and what your support system is in that role and what the supervisor situation is as well. Elaine, do you have any?
I want to mention that it's not unheard of for these kinds of positions which are combined roles of library and management to someday not be that way or to add on more staff. There are ways that I think perhaps people who are cleverer than I am have been able to navigate that. I've only ever held one position. My position at University of Illinois Bands actually included a little subtitle of logistics associate, which meant I just oversaw some operations type details. So, and it wasn't necessarily a bother. It did tie into my work, but as KT said, sometimes defining the boundaries of what was expected of me at that time of is the question that's being asked to me as a librarian, or is it being asked to me as an operations manager? And then when am I being supported enough in one space or the other was a really important discussion for me to have with my supervisors when sometimes those lines got a little blurred or something was being ignored or information that I was requesting wasn't being answered. And it honestly would just feel kind of like disrespected in some ways of saying,
Mhm.
well, this is what you've asked me to do, and suddenly you're not actually helping me do it. So,
Mhm.
but I am here as I've trained as a librarian, and that is the thing that unfortunately, I can just say like care a little bit more about in some ways, or I feel stronger and I feel more confident in this particular role. So I'm naturally going to be more assertive towards that or drawn towards that. And having those conversations with the supervisors, is a really important thing to do because then I think it sets you up for in the future when you need to have the conversation about, well, now I'm drowning in this particular place. These drop balls have been dropped. This isn't really happening, and none of this is happening well. And it's not serving our students. It's not serving our environment, and we're not having a great time. So how can we do this so that everyone is feeling supported, feeling like they're being able to do things to the best of their ability. I think ultimately that's really the important thing to focus on. And
Mhm.
when you're negotiating salaries or navigating those job postings and seeing those kinds of things, I think we have to ask ourselves a question of like what capacity we have for and what kind of confidence we have in any of those kinds of roles and any of those questions that are being asked of us. So I think if hopefully when you get to the interview process, you can ask the questions that help you figure out and feel out what they're expecting from you in those particular titles and designations.
When
Yeah.
we were discussing titles previously, I think particularly at academic institutions, titles can play a role big time in salaries and job postings because of the structure of positions across all different schools and departments within that institution.
Mhm.
And so, for example, one of my positions was department assistant two, and that meant a whole bunch of job duties, including, production, personnel, library, everything, but it was really tied to a specific salary range that was
Mhm.
tied to that type of position that went across the whole school. So even though you were doing very different tasks than somebody with a similar title in a different department or a different school, there were structures built into the university system, and those can be quite rigid. So it can be helpful to try to find a colleague where you can get some confidential information, possibly, I don't know, or to try to get a sense for what those structures are in the institution, which can also be a little bit murky and difficult to access, but it helps to give a framework for why things are structured that way and why salaries might be the way they are.
Yeah,
Schools and
absolutely.
programs love growing.
Yeah.
They're always looking to grow, and it's a really beautiful thing because then it means that more and more students are being able to access the quality work and
Mhm.
resources that we're providing to them. But however, that means that needs are also growing. Staffing also probably should grow. I know this is more of a question for administrator, I guess, but personally, I do feel that if programs are going to grow and then the work on our plates is going to grow, then we also need to have the growth and the support.
Yeah.
So it's worth asking the question as well when you reach the interviews and have the ability to ask questions like what is the growth that they're anticipating? What does that look like? And what are they forecasting? And then ask what kind of support they anticipate they'll provide to go along with that.
Yeah,
Good advice.
absolutely. And I do want to tack on like in, an internal situation, if you're advocating for yourself for your position to have a higher salary or reclassification, that you document everything that you do, every ensemble you support, every service you provide, and like write that down and give that to your supervisor and say like, this is what I do. Or it helps also to, I mean, if you know what your job description is that you had when you first started, write another job description of what you actually do. I found that that really, really helps, especially with administration that may not wholly understand what our roles do. So you cannot document enough. And so especially, you're your own best advocate. And so I think just getting that in writing, really, really, really helps.
Performance librarians can be so behind the scenes and we work to be unnoticed, right? And so many people don't understand what we do or don't understand the responsibilities that we're taking on. And so it can always help to make a list.
Yeah,
Can
absolutely.
let's do how are libraries handling the checkout of digital music and staying in compliance with copyright if you are dealing with digital music?
We do a ton of that. So we um we have first of all, in full disclosure, we scan everything so that we have that in our repository for backup reasons. And a lot of students use tablets in our ensembles. And so when I have a rental work, I negotiate all of those aspects with the copyright holder. They understand that we're an academic institution. They understand for the most part that we make digital materials as backup. And that we're printing a lot because a lot of things are in PDF form that we purchase. And so we have sometimes no option but to have digital materials. And so there's a lot of language in the agreements that we're facilitating that gives you a decent amount of digital rights. And I found that with copyright holders, a lot of folks are very scared to disclose to a copyright holder that they have a digital repository of something. But I have found in my experience that being transparent about this, especially if you, being a public university, we have uh, locked down servers that are only accessible via school credentials. And so we are very strict about who has access to what and what it is used for. And we are very good about, destroying any digital materials that are rental works, post performance, and all of that. So yeah, that's kind of the lowdown of what we do here.
One question I have really quick is, I do see that we're at 1 p.m., but we do have a number of excellent questions still on the docket. Do we have an opportunity to take 5 more minutes, or do we need to?
I think we can take one more.
Does anybody want to choose? There's so many good questions. We have a colleague, a wonderful colleague, Russ, who has asked, are there 12, are these jobs typically 12-month positions? Do you work in the summers or do you find other employment?
I think that's yet again one of those things that varies across the board with your job title, your job description. My position here at Juilliard is 42 weeks, and during the summers, it lightens up a lot for me because I'm not on contract, but I have been very fortunate to find other library tasks to occupy my time during throughout those weeks. However, it also gives me a little time to, step away and have a little vacation and experience different things. And so I'm not mad at it by any means.
Do you catalog and prepare for the upcoming year? It's tough.
Exactly. It's a moment to breathe.
Tough. Yeah, mine were both year-round full-time, and there were summer ensembles as well, depending on the type of institution. But there were also some opportunities to take some of that saved up vacation time and to do, a short summer festival, that type of thing. So it did provide a little bit of flexibility, but the workload was such that it really was a year-round position because you're serving so many ensembles, as Liz mentioned.
Yep. Yeah. I'm same. I'm year round. It does not stop. My busiest time is I mean really during the summer because I'm starting all the fall prep. And also we do have summer programs that happen. And so I don't have time to do a summer festival. But one of the perks of working for a public university is that we have really great benefits. And I am at my max with my vacation time, and I will use that at some point. Maybe we'll see.
Yes, please do.
After the MOLA conference.
Exactly. You'll well deserved. Thank you again for joining us in this presentation. We hope you have enjoyed spending this time with us and encourage you to stay tuned for future MOLA digital presentations. If you have suggestions for future topics to explore, please feel free to contact us. We're happy to hear from you. We would also like to thank Russ Gersberger, Amy Brown, Lisa Dempsey-Kane, Ann Wong, Megan Fisher, Anya Broderick, our lovely MOLA Education Committee, the MOLA Board of Directors, and all our library student workers, past and present, who give us truly indescribable gifts every day. And of course, we thank the incomparable Amy Tackett for making everything possible. Thank you and see you next time.